Welcome back to the CreaTech stage at the cogX Hybrid Festival 2021, co-curated with the UK Creative Industries Council, a forum between government and industry, which brings together all sectors of the creative industries, from film to fashion, advertising to architecture, games to music, performance to publishing. You can find out more about us at thecreativeindustries.co.uk. I'm Janet Hull, and I lead the CreaTech programme for the Creative Industries Council. And I'm also Director of Marketing Strategy at the IPA. It's my pleasure to be your MC for today. We've got a fantastic session ahead of us. Please share your thoughts and comments and get to know each other in the chat. Ask questions of the panelists through the Q&A. And on social, please use the hashtags CreaTechUK and cogX 2021. So the session title is What Will the Olympics Look Like in 10 Years' Time? How Esports and Technology are Changing the Face of Sports. In our 11 a.m. session today, we heard from the Policy and Evidence Centre at the AHRC about new research into CreaTech R&D collaborations. Yesterday, we introduced you to Dream, part of a 40 million investment by UKRI into 4 Audience of the Future demonstrator projects, exploring the immersive future of the creative industries. In this session, we'll be featuring another called Weavr. Look out for it. We'll also be looking at how tech will evolve the traditional sports fan experience, how it has impacted the Olympics over time, and where it will take games in the future. I'm a huge fan of the speakers in this session too, all thought leaders and enthusiasts for UK CreaTech. A big welcome to Sol Rogers, Chair of the Immersive UK Advisory Board and CEO of immersive experience company Rewind, a CreaTech Wants to Watch company for 2 years running in 2019 and 2020. Over to you, Sol, to introduce your panel.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Janet. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And what an exciting time for the future of audience experiences. So as Janet says, I'm Sol Rogers. I'm the founder and CEO of Rewind. We're an immersive experiences company based out of London and Los Angeles. And we've been helping brands and studios the world over to create experiences to help them connect with their audiences in more meaningful ways. And a lot of our work over the last few years has been into virtual reality and augmented reality. And James is CEO of ESL UK, and specifically is here to not only talk about esports, but also about a new platform. So perhaps introduce yourself, and maybe we could show a little video of what Weavr's around.
Yes, thanks, Sol. And yeah, it's absolutely wonderful to be here at cogX. And I'm here to share, obviously, my experience within ESL. ESL is one of the world leading esports companies. We operate esports tournaments all over the world. Obviously, we've been doing that very much online recently for obvious reasons. And but I'm here to talk about a really exciting project that we founded here in the UK. It was one of the first government investments into esports, but a wider speaking opportunity around audience of the future. It's part of the industrial strategy, and we landed a £4 million investment, which was match funded by industry as part of the industrial strategy fund, to basically explore new ways in which fans can experience and engage with their favorite competitive entertainment. And primarily esports, it's case in point, it is the audience of the future. Our audience on average age of around mid-20s, depending on the game. And it's quite a large global audience too. We are serving almost 500 million fans on an annual basis, and that is set to rise, especially in the last year. What we set out to explore was how do we use immersive technology and AI, machine learning, lots of different XR to really build out a future experience for an audience and innovate with them. And we're lucky in esports because the fans tend to be very forgiving of new technologies, or they certainly embrace them and wholeheartedly. And if it creates a good and a positive experience for them, they they really do take that forward. So we get very instant reactions, and either good and bad, obviously. So it started to be a project that we learned a huge amount from. It's a consortium, and I'll briefly mention the companies involved, but Rewind was one of them. ESL was the lead, but we also had Doc 10 up in Manchester, a production company, very well renowned in the UK, of course, doing lots of BBC and other shows. We had Cybula, which is a cloud-based AI company, and York University, who contributed a huge amount of their experience in artificial intelligence and lots of different algorithms. Future Visual, who created some very immersive experiences, which I'll touch on shortly, and Focal Point, who focused on Live 360 production. Now, as I say, esports is a very young audience, but we do believe that it will stem into the future of sports as well. What we find, and we talk to a lot of sports IPs, they're kind of losing their audience in the traditional manner. And I've got some great colleagues on this talk to share some additional experiences. So what we set out to do was build what we call the experience engine. And in a way, it's a kind of a bit of glue, and it pulls together all different technologies and platforms, social platforms, and different wearable tech, and basically use data in every single aspect of building out that experience, a bi-directional data flow of helping the audience interact and engage, not just with the IP itself, the sport or the esport, but also with each other. So in effect, what we do is bring this entire global ecosystem and put it into one place. So ultimately, that fan has every single choice to be able to pick up any type of device and get the best experience possible and engage with that sport. Ultimately, what we also wanted to do was look at new ways of monetizing. We certainly esports, we struggle with the traditional media rights. There's no real factor of gaining a huge amount of revenue in terms of selling our rights to big global broadcasters. In fact, our main platform for our content is Twitch, and Twitch is monetized in a very different manner to traditional broadcast. So what we found ourselves having to do was really provide that direct value to the consumer in order for the consumer to be able to monetize for the value that they believe in and they want to find, as well as help sponsors and other partners get closer to that audience in a very natural manner. Now, what I'd like to do is run a video, and I'll actually talk over it and guide you through it. So hopefully we can play that now. That's great. So this is back in October. We went to Hamburg, which is one of the big ESL 1 events, and we basically tried out a few experiences. There's the logos of all the partners involved, and we set up a booth and we showed several things. We had a VR experience. What we're able to do was get inside the stadium and overlay lots of different points of data, so you can then almost interact with what you're seeing ahead. We had our mobile app, which allowed you to use it in the stadium, but also at home watching the stream to analyze what your favorite players and teams are doing. And it had an AI-driven narrative engine, so it's giving you a custom feed of the points of interest that you might have. It also served purpose by empowering other content creators to tell a better story. We also had an overlay, like an OTT overlay on Twitch. So that allowed people to dive into exactly what's going on and almost gamify the whole stream, because you can vote, you can look at different metrics. This is all personalized and tailored to the individual fans, so no one is getting the same experience. We also re-envisaged the virtual studio. It's amazing what you can do in that virtual space digitally, but we wanted to really try and bring new features, and we created the Holostrator with Doc 10, which basically allowed you to interact with the components and what you can see. And finally, the XR experience, which is the ultimate. It's being able to go into a universe and really experience every aspect of those different use cases, bring your friends in, bring your favorite talent, the influencers, and really enjoy that video, the tournament. Now, we do have lots of examples of how this does translate into traditional sports too. And we'll look forward to talking about those shortly. But I think that's me, Sol.
Thanks so much, James. There's a hell of a lot you've packed into your 5 minutes. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Let's bring in the other speakers today. So we've got Matt McCartney, and we've also got, very kindly, we've got Hannah Brown as well, who's actually flying somewhere in the world. Rarity. I remember we used to get on planes.
I know, crazy. Eh?
I appreciate both your time. So maybe let's start with Matt. So Matt, you are head of XR at Sky Studios. Sky being one of the biggest broadcasters in the UK, and often the ones that seem to have the sports rights.
Hi, Sol. Yes, and again, thank you for having me along. It's going to be a very interesting chat. As you said, yes, so I'm the head of XR at Sky. Really, mine and my team's core focus, it's very broad, is to look at how immersive technology can be used across a multitude of devices to elevate the viewing experience, which sounds very simple, but is actually probably quite complex. For the most part, over the last 2 years, we've been focused on releasing a virtual reality sports viewing platform, which we called Sky Worlds. And we partnered with long-term tech partners, COSM and Tiled Media, to build that and launch that in October last year. Probably far easier than me talking about what it is to tee up the video that you have and just go straight into playing that, because it does a far better job than I ever will.
Let's do this. Live football on a Sunday in VR. Yes, please.
Oh, good goal. Damn it.
It's like being in the stadium. It just gives you one up on everybody else who's watching it on TV.
You're so cool. I am at the goal end of Strathclyde Sirens. Think Pambo's just come through for an interception.
Hey, Ebs.
Hey, there!
Welcome to Extreme E. Here we go.
This is going to be Molly Taylor winning the first ever Extreme E X Prix. She crosses the line.
Can I get some virtual reality popcorn? It's a totally immersive movie watching experience. Basically, you get your own personal cinema and the best seat in the house. You're all together watching the movie in this cinema. It can be a social experience, even if you're not in the same room.
Oh my God, I've got all the Sky Sports channels in one place. Wow.
Wow, you lucky Sky VIP customers.
And there you have it.
A video does paint 1,000 words. That's amazing. That sounds, I can't wait to dig into it. And Hannah, thank you so much for squeezing us into your hectic schedule, by the sounds of it, bouncing around. You are Chief Strategy and Business Development Officer at Formula E, one of the more future-facing sports, in my opinion. Tell me about your role, and then we can see a little bit about your sport. The video I can't wait to see.
Well, great, and thanks very much everyone for having me. I really appreciate it. And apologies that I'm have to be a bit mindful how loud I talk, because I'm sat in the airport lounge. I'm actually on my way out to Mexico for our 8th and 9th races of our 7th season. You rightly said, Formula E is a forward-thinking championship. When you think about when Formula E was incepted by Alejandro Agag and Alberto Longo, they were pretty ahead of their time when you think about the regulatory tailwinds that we now have, both at the city, regional, country level, alongside the commitments that brands, not just car manufacturers, but brands are making around net zero carbon, their impact on society and the legacies that they want to leave in the future. And I think as we run into COP26, we will see, yet another big global push about the importance of sustainability. For us, it's all about putting sport at the heart of that and allowing brands to come and tell, I hate the word authentic, but a really meaningful story about them being associated with wanting to deliver a better future. And so we talk about, how we have the ability to influence audiences around a better future and allow brands to come and be part of that storytelling versus then just going out and putting out media campaigns. So as a result, Formula E from a sporting perspective has a huge commercial program, and a commercial program versus probably any other sport, which, is, a very, very significant number, well over 100 million in commercial revenue alone. When you think about how young we are as a sport, shows that we've got this kind of really big intent and support behind us from a brand point of view, and also the cities within which we race. What we're doing as a management team is thinking really hard about how we develop the kind of consumer proposition, and really working with broadcasters and how we distribute content and tell stories and engage the next generation of sports fans. So great to be here with you all. I'm sure there'll be some questions coming. We have got a little video here. So for those of you that don't know much about Formula E, you can understand a little bit more about us.
It starts with vision. To be faster, to be cleaner. This is how we build a better future. This is Formula E. Pioneering teams racing at the heart of iconic cities in a fusion of real and virtual. Teams, partners, pace setters and pioneers united and positively charged, defending the planet by attacking the track. Formula E. Change. Accelerated.
Wow. Absolutely phenomenal. I mean, what a panel of people to bring together to discuss this. And we are loosely talking around Olympics, but I think we're really talking about sport and how we engage with it. And the Olympics is that upper echelon of every 4 years trying to bring the world together and allow us to all compete. So I guess the first real questions is, audiences are changing. I believe this, and we all do too. And we're trying to engage with them. And I love what you said, Hannah, about trying to engage with them in authentic ways. I feel that this is a question for everybody to answer. It's not individual, but I feel that esports is one of the most, it is a super fast growing sport, but it has that authenticity in it at its core. But its challenges are how it kind of monetizes and gets itself to it, whereas traditional sports are lagging. And Matt, you're trying to look into it, and Hannah, you've managed to bridge that gap of trying to bring something new without having any of the shackles of the old licensing models to kind of hold you back. But what is it, do we think, start with James, how do you think this kind of esports methodology is going to filter back into traditional sports?
Yeah, so I don't think, you'll probably be surprised to hear, I don't think the demand for esports will overtake traditional sports at all. We're human and we like physicality, the world of physicality. What I think it will do is converge. So effectively, what we're seeing in esports is that we're playing with a digital metaverse, basically, in digital worlds, and we're competing by connecting our brains directly with a computer, in effect. But that's about as far as it goes, and we use our hands but then we're starting to see using VR technology in order to create tournaments around that too. And then we start to untether ourselves, and we see things like Hado, which is a Japanese game where you're in a tennis court basically, and you're firing fireballs at each other and using virtual shields, but it's very, very physical. And then on the flip side, we see wonderful new emerging traditional sports that bring that kind of technology into it with it. So ultimately, I'd envisage, never watching a game of football in the same way, because ultimately it's kind of gamified for me. It is an esport, but it's also people running around in a football field, kicking a real ball into a real goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess, Matt, the challenge being about how do you, I mean, you are lucky to have the rights to many of the sports that we traditionally engage with, but perhaps talk on what your approach, and also do you feel that you are engaging the current fan base in the way they want to be engaged with?
Well, let me start by sort of echoing what James was saying, and I sort of agree. I think what we're going to see over the next couple of years, whether it's 5 years, whether it's a bit more, is a shift in audience expectation as to how they actually view things, and you're going to have this almost hybrid mixed reality world where you're able to watch a live event, be it in a stadium, quite possibly, or on your big telly on your wall, and what you're watching then is augmented. And what you start to see is effectively data overlays. All these sports have tremendous amounts of data, and I think it's going to be down to folks like Sky and other broadcasters as to how we display that data, how we draw that out. I'm very excited. We do it in VR already. That's the perfect medium for it. But as you alluded to earlier, it's not a ubiquitous device, and it's not ever going to be. But I think the next generation of sort of 5G enabled smartware that will start to drop over the next couple of years could very well become that device. And once you're heading down that sort of route, your ability to sort of engage with the sport, draw out that data, draw out hologrammatic performances or commentary. You could look at a TV screen, for example, with a pair of smart glasses on, and track the player, and suddenly all that player's stats are up on the screen or floating in the space around you. Run 400 meters, 4 passes complete. All of that sort of stuff. So I think we will see over the next couple of years that sort of coming together of the digital world and the physical world. And I think it'll be down to things like the smartware and, to a lesser extent, the mobile devices in the world today that bridge that gap.
Do you think the audiences for traditional sports are waning? There's always a fear that people are worried that the younger audiences are more engaged with gaming and esports than they are involved with traditional sports. There was films like there's a lot of downward pressure on to try and enable that next audience.
I personally don't believe so. I think all of us here have probably got young kids and families and know people having watched it, and my young children engage with physical sport and love it just as much as gaming. So I don't think there's any danger of folks not following, their local football teams, cricket teams, rugby teams, whatever it happens to be. That's always going to be a part of our culture. I think what we need to do is just find ways of elevating that engagement, crossing through some of what would be seen as the traditional boundaries for viewership in those particular sports. I'm super proud of the work that Sky have just done with Netball England and the Vitality Netball Super League. I think we were the first people to put that live in VR with triple camera switching and so forth, and playing into an Oculus Quest that may traditionally have been seen as a device that is not, for your average netball viewer. I think it's been great trying to break that down and present it in that way. I think it's our responsibility to take all these sports and bring these tech together and try and expose them as widely as possible across the demographics within the UK and within the world.
Yeah, I do want to build on that, Max. I think it's a great point. And for those of us that follow the global media market, I mean, we've just seen a 10-year extension of the NFL deal that doubled the price of what it was sold at previously to all of the incumbent broadcasters. We've just seen the end of the, which is just a phenomenal number, right, to over 10 billion a year between the 5 broadcasters of the NFL. And what you've seen there is Amazon have come in now and taken, they were involved in the last round. They've decided to extend. So, in terms of broadcast and how they distribute content and their model for distribution, it's different to the other domestic broadcasters in the US. But that's then backed up by, I've just read a report yesterday about the huge success that they had in the ad market upfronts, in the unprecedented ad dollars coming back into the US market, and that all centered around live sport. So I think the idea that live sport won't still be relevant, and I think that you look at what CBS did around the NFL last season, where they did they did their normal CBS game, but they also did a transmission specifically through Nickelodeon. So think about how they use the kind of broader CBS assets in order to reach those audiences. And I think, when you look, to Sky, I mean, Sky have had an unprecedented year in terms of live sport audiences. Sure, people being stuck at home has helped that to some extent. We also saw, really exciting and competitive end to both football seasons, with Liverpool winning last year and then a very tight contest this year. So there are all sorts of other factors that drive interest, and I think the great thing is that whether you're a rights holder, you're a club, you're an athlete, you are thinking about how you engage fans across a variety of platforms. And when I roll that across to us at Formula E, we're young and we're thinking about how we grow in the long term. And we're 6-7 years old, and in terms of sporting narrative, we're still incredibly young. But because we started from scratch, we got to rip up some of the rule books. So, you know, what we do around fan engagement and digitization of our sporting experience, I think is very different to anyone else. So we have this concept of attack mode where the drivers have to drive over a certain portion of the track, they get a power boost. We have this concept of fans being able to vote for their favorite driver and being able to give them a bit more power as part of that. And as we're in our second generation car, and we go to our new generation car in season 9. So at the end of the season, one more season, and then we have our new car. And you know, we are thinking more about how we bring fans closer to our drivers, make that content appropriate for use across a number of platforms. But you know, I think this idea that sport on TV is dead, I think will outlive all of us on this call our professional lifetime.
I absolutely agree, Hannah. It was more about the demographic is changing, and I was wanting to dig deeper into your ability and what you have had being a new future-facing sport. Is that trying to change some of the rules of engagement to enable you to get to audiences where they want to be? And a lot of the traditional sports are bogged down by their licensing contracts. I mean, it's interesting to see there's another 10-year contract that almost feels like a reaction to try and hold on to the rights to control them for as long as they can over the next period.
That's actually, well, it's kind of interesting though, because the US they think our European rights cycles are crazy. They just don't operate. All their deals are on 8 to 12-year deals. There's very few deals, even the Premier League, which here is around most of the world, is sold in 3-year cycles. In the US, the last time around was on a 6-year cycle. So, you know, the US has because it is such a big and important market, and the need for these broadcasters to go and tell a long-term story in order to return the ad dollars out of the market, because it's, you know, pay TV is prevalent throughout the country, albeit that's dropped a bit. You're still seeing, 80-85% of homes are taking most premium sports. So the ad market, to tell a story and extract that properly. You know, when you look at the US pay TV market, ESPN is still in 85 million homes. It's still a very, very big pay TV market. Like, they're looking at an absolute worst case scenario of that number potentially falling to 55-60 million homes. You compare that to Sky's business in the UK with around about 5 million sports customers. You see how strong that pay TV market is in the US. So but I think the point around how you attract and engage audiences and how we use content on different platforms so that they become aware, we grow fandom, they get to know the athletes, they're excited about the sport. And I was reading yesterday about the impact, and we've all seen the impact of Drive to Survive on Formula One, but in the US, where Formula One's always struggled to cut through because they're interested in their domestic racing series and not being that interested in anything coming from around the world. But I think the numbers I saw was that ESPN were getting just under 1 million average audience, which is I think over double than what they were getting previously, or 50% up. It's anyway significantly up. And I think the impact of Drive to Survive to reach a new audience. So we talk about gaming and how we reach new audiences, but how we also touch onto other parts of the family and make sport relevant and part of the kind of conversation both at home and we always use the water cooler chat, but which maybe in the last year feels a little less relevant, but how you make sport relevant to people, and we also see gaming and tapping into a gaming market also is important. James and I have talked long about this over the years, and at Formula E, we have launched a kind of virtual racing series for all sorts of reasons. We want to make people feel like they've got a chance to participate. When they win, we put them in a real life Formula E car. We're right at the beginning, but I think there's a really exciting opportunity where especially in motor racing, where the cost to compete and to take part is super expensive, that of all sports, the virtual experience is a direct read across. Now, is it a big e-sport? Absolutely not. But can we create opportunities and excitement, for other people to come and watch, people racing in a virtual environment, feeling, well, that's not too far away. I could imagine being part of that. So, it's definitely complicated, but we've just got to try and think up simple solutions of how we drive relevancy and excitement and characters. And it's important for the athletes to realize they have a responsibility in this, and I think esports, I'm sure James won't disagree with me. So some of the struggles we have is some of these characters are not that marketable and they're difficult to get other people excited about them. So I think
in all sports we have plenty of those sorts of characters. I don't think it's just esports. There's plenty of unmarketable characters which we have to be careful with. I mean, that does touch on a good point, and moving the subject slightly on, but do you think the technologies that we have, and I'm not talking about the technologies of the car that you guys are racing in, but more about the technologies are changing of esports are changing the idea of an athlete. Traditional sports in our world are often, we consider that you have to have physical prowess, and to be at the top echelon, you need to have been born with a certain genetic disposition to be able to be physically large, fast, or anything else. Esports is a very different playing field that people can play within, and it's an utterly level. There is, all of us can play pretty much, and we could all get to the top of that sport. And I think there's something interesting around that. And then specifically within the Olympics, there seems to be a small test group of esports rolling out in this year's competition. And so the question is, do we think esports and digital sports will end up on the same roster in an Olympics in the future?
I mean, just to start there, I think the interesting thing is you don't see much about an esports athlete. They're sitting and staring at a computer screen, basically. So really, apart from, there is definitely the popularity contest. It's, I like the look of that guy, or I've got something in common with him, maybe same country or region or whatever. But what the data allows is it's about access. It's about access to their social feeds, but also what's behind them, what's going on inside their head. What does their performance mean if I was to analyze what's going on? And I think we're seeing a lot more of that in traditional sports too, but at the core, that is esports. Like when these athletes are performing, we're actually looking at their virtual avatar that they're controlling. That's what we're actually observing in terms of performance. So it's kind of, how is that person controlling that avatar? What are they doing special? How does that differ to the other people playing or the other team playing? And, I like this person because of X, Y, and Z. Are they going to make me proud? Can I predict how well they can do? Can I have a laugh and a social experience with my friends in experiencing that? And so I think, it's about access. Technology is giving us unprecedented access on the stuff we cannot see, basically.
And I think to follow up on that point, it's quite interesting. And Sol, I think with your background, you'll agree with this. I hope that a few years ago there was lots and lots of talk and lots of hype around what technology could do and promise, and certain AR wearables that will change the world and all of this sort of stuff. And it all fell a little bit flat, if we're honest. It just wasn't there. Roll on a few years to now, and I think we're actually at the point where not just devices at the consumer end, but actually core platform-centric technology up in the cloud, albeit 5G delivery, which will give you low latency for streams and data into those headsets, is being realized. And I think it's those things coming along now that are going to allow mass adoption or mass viewing capability by audiences. So you've got those two things coming together. You've got the technology finally delivering on its promise, and you've got now the sports and the contents and the rights and the people wanting to invest in it and look at it to bring those to those audiences.
Absolutely. I mean, as Hannah, you have, like you're saying about the digital Formula E racing series, and then you transition them over. Maybe you could talk about how that works for you guys. Is it just a way of bringing fans in, or do you think it will ever stand up as you'll have a digital series and a true esport?
A great question. I mean, so firstly, in terms of like the tie back to the Olympics, I think that Peter Beyer at the FIA is, very vocal about, his ambitions for motorsport, using virtual racing to be part of the Olympics. So, whether it's virtual racing or, how that plays through the electric, through, I say the electric ladder, but all motorsport ladder, from karting right up to taking part in, world championship events. So, we have run now 2 of these events over kind of a 6 or 8 week period, both in 2 separate blocks. One last year when the world shut down, then we did another one in January, February. To James's point, getting this stuff onto TV is difficult. And whilst the digital platforms can do a great job in terms of ease of distribution, for us in particular, engaging and reaching a new audience and driving awareness, then there still is a role to play for TV, and when the schedules are busy, then this sort of content is something that is pretty difficult to get scheduled, as James has alluded to. So look, I think it will be a long-term play, and I think that how we join together this kind of aspiration, kind of X Factor type experience where you know, not everyone, like we all like to sing in the shower, but most of us aren't any good to go, aren't good enough to go on X Factor. So what I call is like a broadcast replacement product. So how we can use virtual gaming as another broadcast product, be it on whatever platform that might be. How we can, once we go back racing, potentially tie that into, let's say, you know, and none of this is planned or we've got the execution like strategy lined up just yet, but you know, you can imagine Friday nights, free ticketing. You know, great thing about Formula E is we're in city centres largely, so we're really easy for people to get to. They don't have to drive an hour and a half. You know, we could, you know, we've always believed in a really affordable ticketing ticketing strategy. So you can imagine Friday nights where, you know, the drivers come and participate for 25 minutes, half an hour. We've got some qualifiers from the local city that are taking part in racing. We do free ticketing and, you know, a few characters, and kind of build it into the experiential experience. If I can call it an experience, we can build it into the experience. And how we then complement that with, you know, potentially other, like, you know, mobile integrations, which are light touch, and console gaming. So, you know, we are very much at the beginning of our journey. You know, we are integrating our IP into a number of like broadly available games, but I think drawing it all up together into a kind of coherent story about, you know, why as a young mobile gamer you really enjoy playing Formula E stuff, and like, you know, whether we can incentivize you through merch and licensing opportunities to come down and, you know, spend a Friday night with us at a race, come and join our race with your family, you know, maybe watch someone that's come through the ranks a bit, maybe they've come through virtual gaming into an electric kart and into a junior series, and now you can come and watch them and be part of the aspirational experience. So, but this is all, you know, 5-10 year plans. It takes time to build that. So we're at the very beginning of that journey, but you know, it's something that is, you know, when we think of the, you know, 3 to 5 things on our list of how we develop and grow our business, and this is absolutely one of them.
I think there's just to kind of build on that, I think what we have now is a breakwater point in the quality of technology. So the esports world has often been stylized, as James was talking about, moving an avatar around within a space, be it questing, jumping, fighting, driving, or anything in between. But the output of the latest game engine technologies is broadcast quality. And so within your space, within your Formula E digital experience, if the camera angles were created in the same way and the drama was distributed in the same way, I'd be very hard pushed the audience to be able to tell the difference between the game engine output and the real world. I think the big challenge, though, that we miss with a lot of esports is that drama that you get from something happening in the real world and being driven by humans, the not knowing what might happen. Will they make this corner? Will they crash? Will it all happen? And knowing that it's physical and real definitely has a bigger impact to the narrative and a bigger excitement to what's going on. We do get that in esports, but it doesn't have the same level of drama that you do with a physical sport. Exactly. That's what I feel anyway at the moment.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, it's even amazing when you watch when the real drivers are driving the virtual environment versus the esports drivers. And the real drivers, you know, don't put on a great spectacle because they drive it like it's a bumper car and there's loads of smashes, whereas the esports drivers take it much more seriously and are much more mindful of each other. But I think that's right. And I think it comes back to the, like, why does it matter? Because sport has to matter and you have to care about the people. And so hence why this, you know, people can enjoy racing against each other, which is great, and they want to watch it. But in order to be appealing for anyone else, like, they've got to be drawn into the story, which is why we all fall in love with the Olympics. And it doesn't matter if it's, you know, archery, rowing, swimming, or whatever, or, you know, 4 people
really
skiing down a
mountain.
Well, because you know, but the broadcasters, you know, and they've been doing it for a long time, do a really great job of hooking us into those stories about why we care about people and why we care about the outcome. And we all, like, finish the Olympics and I'm definitely going to watch karate for the next 4 years. And then we don't, because understandably the broadcasters get distracted and you know, they've got other stories to tell. So I think we have to remember that and realize you can't just create content and hope people are watching. You've really got to come up with a real reason which drives people to engage. And, you know, I'm using the X Factor as an example, but it's that they tell great stories and you see this kind of human endeavor and the chance that, you know, that someone makes it. I end up somehow or other with insomnia watching the I don't think Netflix made the film, it was on Netflix, the James Corden Paul Potts story. You know, he did James Corden played Paul Potts, and I hadn't really, I kind of heard about the Paul Potts story, but hadn't really watched a lot of Britain's Got Talent. But you know, it's these stories that connect people and make them care, and I think that it's important that with esports we think about that. If we want to reach a broader audience and you know, make it aspirational, then how we build characters, I think, is going to be important. How we create pathways for them that other people want to aspire to.
Yeah, may I add to that? I mean, if you think about it, video gaming it's interactive entertainment, right? And ultimately, it allows you to do things that you can't do in real life, ultimately. And many of the very popular esports tend to be set in the fantastical world, and you're playing characters that can't really exist in real life, and they can't do things that you can do in real life. Sorry, the other way around. So when you look at sort of transitional digital versions of an actual traditional sport, it's more of a way of access, because, you know, I'd love to go out and buy myself a Formula E car and drive it around the track, but it's going to cost me several million euros. So I'm not going to do that. But the next best thing, I could set up an amazing rig at home. I can have the virtual reality headset. I can have a steering wheel, and I can feel like I'm an actual driver. And then I can start competing with other friends and other people in other communities and the real drivers at some point, to the point where actually maybe I am good enough to drive a Formula E car, and I could, as Hannah says, I could rise the ranks and go into electric karting and find a career for myself. Obviously, that's not the goal. That's not why I did it, but it's just an absolutely fantastic way in which an audience can actually participate in that traditional sport.
Well, I guess kind of leads us into the kind of final questions and a little bit of future gazing. We're all working in the here and now, but where do we think an Olympics is going to look like in the next, let's go a long way out, 20 years time? You know, what sports are being played? How are fans engaging with it? How are we attending with it? What technologies are enabling this kind of space that we might be living in?
Yeah. I mean, Matt might be much better, you know, placed on. Could I imagine 20 years time that across football, you know, I mean, football probably is like, you know, a really obvious one. Like, can you imagine like a global community of people coming into like this kind of, you know, huge draft of, you know, around the world? They're all playing virtually. They're not traveling to the event. They're like in some massive knockout ladder that takes them through to the finals, and how that associates with the football Olympics, I don't know on the real side, but you could imagine something like that happening. Whether they're going to award them a gold medal for it or not, TBC. But 20 years feels long enough that no one will play back this video and hold us to account for it. So, but you feel like you could imagine that happening.
I think it's probably something along the lines of hybrid, isn't it? You know, from a broadcast perspective, I think the engagement for something like the Olympics and other sports will be very different. You know, I look forward to the world where, you know, whether it's football or track and field or whatever event it is, you know, full live real-time volumetric streaming means I don't have to watch it on TV anymore. It is that sort of hologram, it's almost the Star Wars chess moment, isn't it? It just plays on my kitchen table. So I think you'll get a point where viewers from around the world will be able to literally watch the thing for real, walk around it in all dimensions and view it. I can probably see a world from a competitor's perspective where you do get a bit hybrid. It would be interesting to see whether you do get certain sports being competed and folks don't need to go there because it is virtual and digital, and maybe that plays into, I was quite interested in what you were saying a minute ago, so about sort of that old school understanding that athletes with a physical prowess and they had certain attributes. Well, actually, I think esports is the same. I think there are people that are heavily predisposed with higher hand-eye coordination or better dexterity or reflex and reaction. That is just another physical attribute showing itself for another event type thing and competition. So I think you will see all of that coming together. But for me, from the broadcast perspective, it's got to be about how those events are presented back into the homes, back into the viewers around the world. And I think in 20 years' time, it will be full holograms, lovely real time. You'll be able to walk around, you'll be able to pause it, stop it. You can almost do that today, actually. There are certain technologies there that allow you to stop. You know, you touched on games engines. We've not really talked about them, but they sit at the heart of being able to render, capture out, and have that sort of deep analysis, that understanding, you know, stop the shot, swivel it around, watch it from the goalie's perspective. You know, things that I'm super interested in are, You know, take cricket, for example, you know, Jofra Archer bowling a ball down you at 1,000 miles an hour, capture that, and then 30 seconds later in a device, you're able to experience that from the batsman's perspective. That's incredible. And I think those are the types of things over the next 10, 20 years that will just become the norm. And I truly believe audiences will drive that expectation. They're becoming smarter, they're demanding more, they're expecting more. I think broadcasters have the responsibility to deliver more. And it'll be that everyone jumping, everybody gaming up to get to that point, which is great. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and to build on exactly what Hannah and Matt said, you take the global aspect of this audience and you basically put them all into a metaverse, in effect. I think we're moving towards that idea where ultimately there will always be the very premium experience will be there on the ground, physically watching the events unfold and you know, having that very physical experience, probably with a lot of augmented reality and wearing your glasses or whatever it is. But then for all the rest of those people, not only will it be watching and viewing within that metaverse as if you're in that space pretty much, but you will also be able to compete. You'll be able to put your own stakeholding in there. You know, if a goal has just been scored, you could go and walk up to a virtual goal and kick a virtual ball and see if you can do the same thing. And that's an ever evolving process. And, you know, the game engines are absolutely, and cloud technology and then delivery with 5G will absolutely get us to that point. And as the screen technology and that immersive experience starts to become more real, you're just going to naturally fall into it. But I still think we'll always, in premium, want to get back to the physical space. Even in esports, the best experience is what's behind me because you're in amongst it.
So I think when we look at stuff, and you're absolutely right, you know, when we look at anything we do at Sky and when we look at we're building Sky Worlds, we ask, you know, two really simple questions. What is the next best thing to being at the event? How you know, when you go to a stadium, it's 20, 30,000 people. There's hundreds of thousands or even millions of people that are disappointed that they can't get there for any number of reasons. So how do you serve that side? And then once you're doing that, what can you offer those folks engaging through those devices that is above and beyond what the folks in the real world will be seeing? Where do you differentiate? Where can you offer those guys extra on top of it? And you know, answer those questions.
Absolutely. Well, you're all building that future, I think, and we'll build off of that over 20 years. Although 20 years feels like a long time. Remember that it was only 2001 was 20 years ago, and we remember that all pretty clearly. And so it's not that far away before we'll be looking at where we'll end up with the Olympics.
Yeah.
But thank you.
No, it was always a bit depressing to think it's now 20 years since I graduated from university. So, oh no, when I got to university, sorry. I don't want to age myself even more.
Well, you missed the start of it. James and I share a birthday, so we know exactly how old each other are. Yeah. And happy birthday for last weekend.
Yeah, you too, Sol.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the call. I mean, a really, really interesting, fascinating look at it. Like I said, I do think that all three of you, and there are many people in our industry, are already building the bedrock and trying to engage fans better. I think the drama of live sport is something, and the drama of live is something that we all want and miss. On demand is phenomenal, and you know, we can watch any movie at any time, and we can play a game whenever we want. But when it's a destination, when it's a time and a moment that creates something in history, and it's played with real people, and we're not sure how the end result will end out, that is something we all have a passion for. And getting audiences closer to that through technology is just going to be really exciting over the next period. Especially, you know, Sky Worlds have been breaking ground, esports is exploding, and Hannah, that hybrid approach you've got is just really, really great. And we'll see how maybe one day Formula E is an Olympic sport. Who knows? I'll back that.
Who knows? Exactly.
Who knows? But thank you all for joining me, and thanks for cogX for having us along. It's really appreciated, and especially thanks for Janet for putting this all together. I think CreaTech itself is really a leading voice for bringing together, as I said at the very beginning of this, art and technology, and it's the application and innovation. And the UK has a very specific and very special position within the world to use our understanding of the creative industries and bring it out through CreaTech. So thank you all for coming along today.
Oh, thank you for having us, Sol. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks so much, Sol, James, Matt and Hannah. What an exciting discussion about the future. 20 years hence, the most far-sighted view that we've had over our CreaTech stage in the last couple of days. So we're thinking that esports will not overtake traditional sports, but they will converge into a hybrid mixed reality world. So what will the Olympics look like in 10 years' time? Looks like the broadcasters are doing a brilliant job of using new technology to enhance their audience experience. But is virtual gaming another broadcast product of the future? And I'd like to challenge James Dean to say, what can Weavr, this fantastic new experience engine that he's developed courtesy of the collaborative work with UKRI, what can it contribute to this evolution and this expansion in the future? And what can we do at the Commonwealth Games in 2022 in Birmingham to start to get that whole movement going? Thanks very much for your time.